Town Band Banter with Doc and Dave. Every week, two longtime friends and colleagues in the world of music, David Price and Donald Doc Smith, get together to discuss the triumphs as well as the twists and turns of lifelong learning for the dedicated members of thousands of civilian community music ensembles of every shape and size. Your comments and suggestions are always welcomed through email as info@townbandbanter.com, Facebook, Town Band Banter, and Instagram, #TownBandBanter. And now for our hosts, Doc and Dave.
All right, here we go, Dave.
Uh-oh.
Season 2.
No
Can
way.
you believe it? Episode 1 of season 2.
Season 2.
I don't know. It's setting the bar kind of high with the guests that we have today, but it's been a fantastic first season. We're killing it with males over 60. In that demographic. Not so good with most of the other demographics, actually all of the other demographics.
I don't know about you, but I get more of the females over 60.
Well,
it's just the way it works out.
That's why I invited Dr. Bundy. He would bring
right.
them all on. He's going to help us with every one of those demographics. And we all learned that the tech side last year. Remember, there's this progression. And then when I checked this morning and over the last 2 days to set up for this, I found out that the updates had put all of those learning out of existence. It no longer, those things never work, and we'll figure them out as we go. We're back to simple using Zoom. So, but it works fine. And we have a bunch of really great guests and topics lined up for season 2. But this is one of my dear friends from the past.
And I thought I was your only dear friend.
Well, I have another animal that I have associated with our friendship, which we'll leave off the air for right now. But now, Dr. Bundy was one of the first people that I met at Penn State, and then you were one of the first people that I met here at the University of Rhode Island. So I'm in very good company. And
welcome, Doctor. Good to see you, Dr. Bundy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm not so sure 76-plus-year-old is going to help with your demographic, with any of your demographics.
Well, yeah.
We do ghost tour episodes as well. So I guess my understanding is that I met you when you were grad assistant, I think, and then you went off to Michigan, or you were just back from Michigan.
Well, no, I had completed my master's at Michigan when I was a grad assistant at Penn State.
Okay, so that was right after that, and then you did dissertation, did the doctorate at Penn State, music ed, just like myself.
Correct.
Your dissertation, I remember that. It was fascinating. It was really a really cool topic.
It was the means to the end, So
like I proved completing my degree that persistence is far more helpful than brilliance.
Yes, there's a reason they call it a terminal degree.
But we learned a lot, and I learned a lot hanging out with you and also with the band. I think the band expanded sometime while I was there, and you closed yourself up in a room to redo pregame for 2 weeks.
Correct. Yeah. A couple of times over the years, actually.
Right. And I don't know if it's happened again. Has it expanded one more time or no?
It hasn't expanded since I retired. No. So they're still using I forget even what year it was, but the second time that I rewrote it.
Yeah. Wow. It was quite the thing. We beta tested, remember, drill design, right? Remember you talked to Ned. Ned Deal was the director at that time.
Yeah.
We were on the front end, the cutting edge of technology there. And all I remember about that was that it would take like 20 hours to print out an individual page for each member of the band and show them where their assigned dot for every specified drill was. And it was so hard for the kids to adapt. First of all, it took 20 hours, and we had to change the paper and ribbon twice or something like that.
Oh, yeah, it was on those feet. You get the box of that perforated paper with the holes on the side.
Right.
You hook it up, and you start it running, and then come back and check it like 12 hours later and hope that nothing had happened, because if it just sat there not doing anything, now you were going to be another 20 hours behind.
Right. We would take turns and, set the alarm for 3:00 in the morning and go in and change it around and come back in and do it again and then hand it out to the kids. And they'd say, wait a second, am I on Mickey Mouse's ear or on his nose? Where am I in the, that was the problem with that. But then we were also beta testing the animation when that started.
Yeah, well, we were pretty early on that. Yeah.
But that started being helpful, but no one had a program big enough for the size band that we had.
It was tough in those first several years. Yeah, it didn't really help us a lot. We spent a lot of time dealing with it, but it really wasn't as helpful as we had hoped, But
Yeah.
eventually we got to the program out of Texas that was helpful.
Right.
But I'm sorry, Doc.
No.
In the East here, we don't have these big size bands. For those people that are not familiar with it, how big of a group are we talking about? How big of a band is it at that point?
Well, when I retired, we had the total student membership would have been about 310. It would have been plus or minus 5 from 310. And the pregame block that we used for, again, when I retired, at the time that I retired, was a 225 member instrumentalist group. And then you add on the Silks and the Majorettes. So we would march about 280 at pregame. And then at halftime, a lot of more of the instrumentalists would join the group. And we had actually a little bigger group at halftime. Because the halftime we did a little, the pregame, as Don probably has already told you, was very traditional. It's a very traditional pregame. And then at halftime, we tried to be, a little more contemporary. But, we're, again, pretty traditional band. So I used that with a grain of salt that we were contemporary at halftime. But it was a little better, a little more contemporary.
Well, we were doing like 7 shows. So we did a range of things during the
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we kind of kidded that, tried to do something to offend everyone during the course of the season.
Yeah, right.
Something in the back of my memory was the size of the band was limited by the size of an L-1011 jet. Which
that was one of the factors. That and the number of buses that would cost to move us any place.
Right, exactly. And the L-1011 was just enough with like 20 or 25 dignitaries that would fly.
And the number of seats that the athletic department was willing to allow us to have in the stadium.
I'm sure the people who were doing the budget weren't concerned about the balance of tenor saxes to alto sax. That wasn't much in consideration. So why don't we something I don't know very much about with you. Oh, there was one other thing that I wanted to bring up. One of the things that really impressed me about you as a person, right, early on, was when we had the 2 trailers that we finally got that were stationary, and we went to your house to build a deck.
Yeah.
No idea that you were such a good carpenter, and I knew you were a good teacher, but the ability to get that crew, we built that deck in no time flat. You had all the materials. You showed everyone how to measure, how to cut, how to,
Gosh, you and I are probably 2 of the only folks that still remember that. But yeah, that was interesting. I'd always had an interest in carpentry and woodworking and things like that. But that was a case where I knew if we asked the university to build it, it would take 2 months to do a feasibility study and another 2 months for them to decide whether they could budget for it. And, so it was one of those better to seek forgiveness than to ask permission kind of thing. So we just built it, put it in place, and then sat back and waited. I remember being a little concerned when I saw a couple guys from OPP out there looking closely at it one day. And I thought we were going to be in trouble until we got a message from them saying they wanted to know who all had been involved in building it because they liked the design.
And it said they've left the country, So then the building is now named after you. And I'm wondering, did the same procedure happen for building the building? Did you just, take care of that too?
Well, no, that one didn't work. Although the building was a design build project, they called it. I wasn't familiar with that terminology, but what it means is that they're actually designing the building while they're building it. And so there were constant meetings. We met once, twice, sometimes 3 times a week during the start of the building in particular, as they were designing it and putting things in place. And as they would do things, then that would affect the continuation of the design. I don't know how much, we probably don't have enough time, but I have a couple of interesting stories about that, but I don't know if there's time for that.
We'll see. We could add them later if we need to. Let's get what I'm really interested in is how you got into this whole band world thing. I don't think we've ever talked about your early days, and obviously we're locked into community bands, so we
Uh-huh.
eventually get to the State College Community Band, you know.
Sure.
But were there impacts along the way? So you started, I think you told me fourth grade, right? Trombone.
Yeah, yeah. I started playing trombone in fourth grade, and and I liked it. It was fun. I was doing it, but I didn't really get interested in the possibility of band directing until probably my junior year in high school. I was selected to play in a district band, and Arnold Gabriel, the conductor of the United States Air Force Band, was the guest conductor, and it was pretty impressive, And my next year, I made it past the district into the regional event, and that year, Jim Dunlop, who was director of bands at Penn State, was the conductor for that one. So both of those events and the experiences I had there kind of influenced me towards, music ed. So then,
And Penn State.
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
You ended up in a military band and Penn State. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I went to Penn State as an undergrad. I actually auditioned at Duquesne University. As a trombonist. I studied with Matty Shiner, who was the grand poobah at that time of trombone teaching at Duquesne, but he only had one scholarship remaining for that year, and I came in second in the competition. So I didn't get that scholarship, and my folks couldn't afford for me to go to Duquesne at that time. So I went to Penn State, which I have no regrets about at all. But had a good time at Penn State, graduated from there, and I was about to be drafted. This was in 1970 at I won't say the height of Vietnam War, but it was towards the end of the Vietnam War, but it was one of the first draft lotteries that they did, and my number came up, and to have a little more say in my military occupational skill, or MOS at the time, I auditioned for a band and was accepted into the United States Continental Army Band at Fort Monroe, Virginia. And so I went into did basic training at Fort Dix, and ended up at that band for 3 years until 1973. And when I got out in 73, then I got a job as the band director and instrumental music teacher for the Iroquois School District on the eastern city limits of Erie. It was a county school, but butted up against the eastern side of Erie, Pennsylvania.
Really inaccessible from all areas of the country.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, right. And during that time, I did my master's at Michigan. And in the course of doing the master's at Michigan, they at Michigan started talking to me about what I consider doing a doctorate and blah, blah, blah. And I had never really thought of that before then. But when they asked that, then I began thinking about it. Then I realized that the cost of going to Michigan as an out-of-stater, I couldn't afford. I had a family at that time, I had 2 kids, a third one on the way, and all this kind of stuff. So I did investigate, and I checked with Penn State, and they did have a graduate assistantship a year later than when I would have ideally liked to have started, because I was still trying to utilize the GI benefits. So any rate, I came and I was a graduate assistant teaching the classroom music for classroom teachers course at Penn State, the one that for elementary ed teachers that had to be able to do something musical in their elementary classrooms.
How many courses how many sections of that were offered? Tons.
Oh, there were, I don't know how many. I don't even know. I only had a couple sections, there were probably 10 or 15 sections of being offered of that. I think it was music 241, or I don't remember for sure.
How long were you grad assistant?
Well, I did the graduate assistant thing it ended up being like almost 6 years. No, I take that back. I'm sorry. I did that for 3 years. After the second year is when the then assistant director of bands, Daryl Ramsey, took a job at the University of Texas in San Antonio. And I was already in the job market. I had taken an interview at Bowling Green University and a couple other places, and I wasn't done with the degree yet. And when Daryl got that job in Texas, they asked me if I would I consider being the acting assistant director while they did a search. And I thought, well, it might be a way to get my doctorate finished, because I was ABD at the time. So I said, all right, my wife and I talked about it. Okay, we'll do that. Well, I didn't realize the scope of the job being assistant director. So for the next 4 years, I got nothing done on the dissertation. So I was 4 years as acting assistant director. And then I finally, in the 5th year, got what do they call it? I managed to get a fellowship from the university so that during the summer, I didn't have to be doing other jobs to make ends meet for our family, and I could focus on my dissertation. So I got that in really rolling in process and so forth, was able to finish the dissertation. Then they decided to fill the position on a more permanent basis, and I applied for the job I'd been doing. And, and then one thing after another, I ended up
building named after you. Yeah.
Retiring from here. Yeah.
Well, and somewhere in there, you were Dean of Arts and Architecture for.
Well, no, that wasn't Dean. I served as an acting director, not acting, as an assistant director of the School of Music for a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
And as acting assistant director of the School of Music, I found myself to be an adequate band director.
Yeah.
I didn't really enjoy that administrative kind of thing.
Oh, I remember that. I remember being kind of surprised that you took that position, but you explained it quite well. Like it was just someone had to do it. Right for it.
Yeah. Yep.
The job. So that's good. So somewhere in there were community bands, right?
There were, yeah. I got involved with the State College Municipal Band, it's called, in 1984. Yeah, 1984. And I did it for, I think, like a dozen years or so, something like that. The mid 90s, whenever Ned retired and I was taking over as director of the Blue Band, we kind of switched roles. I no longer felt I had the time to do municipal band, and he, retiring, was looking for something to do, so he took over municipal band and I took over Blue Band.
Right. That worked perfectly.
Yeah.
So what got us started doing this was talking about the stuff that goes on with, because you have an 85-year-old sitting next to a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
So, generational stuff, which is fantastic. But then, and the double-edged sword of cognitive being supported by continuing to do music, but at times cognitive getting in the way as you're aging, as well as the visual and the aural and the kinesthetic. Like everything is a balancing act, and the desire to continue playing is so powerful for some of these people. I had no idea. We're exploring it more during this, but why don't we, just grab one of those, and is there one that kind of stands out that as you were running the band, something to deal with and solutions maybe?
Yeah, well, I don't know that I have answers for solutions, but I do know that we experienced some of those very same things. I mean, there were some elderly members of the group, who had difficulty even ambulating. In some cases would come on stage with a walker, but once they got there and could play, they were really enjoying themselves. They were the kind of folks who never missed a rehearsal. Never, because I think it was a case, and I've seen this with a number of instances over the years, particularly when I was teaching high school, that it was a case of them, I think, needing the band more than the band actually needed them. But it was a mutually agreeable kind of situation. They may not have been the best player in their section, but they were certainly one of the most enthusiastic and most reliable, and appreciated what the band did for them, I think, or what their role in the band was, more than a lot of others.
Dick, I don't know if you know or not, whether Doc told you, but both of us play in a 20-piece swing band.
Oh, yeah.
And what's the average age, you think? We were talking about
somewhere
that
between 70 and death. Yeah, somewhere.
The upper.
Yeah, that sounds like the kind of group I'm playing with nowadays too. So,
a big band, swing band.
Well, actually, I'm not playing. I should preface. I'm not playing with any group regularly right now, just because I promised my wife that I wouldn't get committed to regular rehearsals and things like that with something. But I do fill in with the State College. There's a State College big band. They call themselves. I'll think of it in a second. But anyways, I'll sub with them when they're short someone, and I still play with the municipal band on occasion. Again, I don't want to be that guy who only shows up for the gigs. But if they get close to a gig and they're down a player or two and the trombones or baritone, I can help, I'll go and play, those kind of things.
So the swing band is a range of ages then?
Oh yeah. There's some in that group that are still in high school.
Oh, okay.
Play, and it's a way for them to expand their experience, But then you're right, it's right up to people my age and older who are playing in that group,
It's soaking up that enthusiasm, or all of that experience.
Yeah.
Using the enthusiasm of the younger kids and the energy.
Yeah. And it's an augmentation of the experience that they can get in high school, because the State College music program is pretty good. They go to get a good experience there. But it's also an augmentation of that experience for them to come and play in a group like that and see these folks who are old enough to be their grandparents or older, still playing and still enjoying doing what they're doing.
Well, you play the Westerly band, that there's multi-generational right there, like grandpa, dad, and kid, playing in the band.
Yeah. That would be great. That would be great.
I sit right next to a guy who plays French horn, and he's 85. And I think his father played till he was in his mid 90s and finally stopped somewhere in there. But that band's been around since 1850, I think, something like that. So,
wow. Yeah.
I mean,
that's great stuff. I mean, that to me is what it's all about. Like the State College Municipal Band was not an audition group. It was just, if you want to play, come on out, and that creates some issues too, some challenges. Sometimes you've got a pretty wide range of abilities within a section, and sometimes you have empty spots in sections. I mean, there's sometimes we don't have any percussion coming up on this concert. What are we going to do?
English horn part is not being covered, right?
Yeah. Nobody to play that alto clarinet part. Gosh, what are we going to do?
I announced at the Jamestown concert that it's a select ensemble. Whoever selects to be in it is
right. That was the kind of select ensemble we were. Yeah.
But that was a very good band. The more nuts and bolts of it is that how are parts assigned in the municipal? Who gets clarinet 1, clarinet 2, and clarinet 3?
Yeah. Well, for us, a lot of times it was, well, actually most of the time probably, it was I think there's an awareness among the players as to where they belonged, where they were best suited. And so it was pretty good. It was pretty well accepted that this person, was going to be the first chair clarinet, and everybody else would sit accordingly, or who was going to be the lead trumpet, and everyone else kind of sat accordingly. And we never really had in the 12 or 15, whatever years that I did it, we never really had an issue with anybody being bruised egos or upset or anything about what part they were playing, at least not that I was aware of. But I think part of that was just due to coming into the situation in most cases kind of with a realistic understanding of what their abilities were and where they might contribute the best.
Well, we are kind of running short on time. No, I could talk to you for hours. We will tomorrow. We're meeting at the game in our ponchos. Hopefully it'll be much better. But we have a couple questions that we like to ask all of our guests. So hopefully we'll get, what was your most memorable experience with the community music ensemble?
Most memorable with the community band here probably was we used to play the 4th of July activities. We did a concert there, and it would be towards the latter part of the day, and we would do that famous transcription of the 1812 overture. Oh, cool. And the band always rose to the occasion and played it, generally very well. and was very well received. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and that's, I guess, probably one of the things that's maybe more meaningful about that was, even though it was an outdoor setting, so acoustically not the most ideal, there were a lot of people there who got to hear the band, and so it helped to spread the news that we existed.
Right. There were concerts throughout the year.
Yeah, 4th of July was kind of, oh, no, I shouldn't say 4th of July. The excuse me, the Arts Fest always occurred right after the 4th of July. We would play at the Arts Fest also, Central Pennsylvania Festival of the Arts. And that was our last gig then until in the fall. We would start up again in September or early October.
The second question was, how did participating in music ensemble affect you? I think we kind of covered that already. And the challenge with an ensemble, and how was it overcome, and pretty quick?
Oh, gosh, as far as the municipal band, I think the biggest challenge was ensuring that we had a place to rehearse. And so, because sometimes, if there was a school, we generally rehearsed at the school auditorium, on a stage in an auditorium. But if there was an event or something, they rightly took priority for scheduling their events over us having rehearsal.
Wow.
So we just tried to be flexible.
Right.
Yeah, gotta be.
Like so many bands, if they don't have their own rehearsal hall. What do you see for the future of community bands?
Well, I'm not a clairvoyant, but I hope that maybe with the number of people that are in the boom generation like us, that have had lots of these experiences, that it's going to continue to be a positive thing and an active thing. I worry a little bit after that, because it seems like band programs overall have declined, and interest in younger people seems to decline. But I think for the time being, I think community bands are still, I think, fill a need and have a valuable purpose in what they do.
Wow, that's a great way to close, don't you think? That's so. Thank you so much, Dr.
Sure.
Being on.
Thanks for asking an old timer to be part of this.
We'll bring you back on. We'll get more in depth in some of those things. Some of the solutions and some
Sure.
of the.
Be glad to. Yep.
In the meantime, how we always close is just keep on playing.
That's a good one.